Hello and welcome to Black Voice News' Care in the IE podcast. I'm Alyssa Hall and I'll be your host. Today I'll be speaking with Jermaine Moore, who's a caregiver to his son Jayden, who has autism. And later I'll be talking to Dr. David Young, who's a pediatric neurologist at Loma Linda University Health. Jermaine, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So if we could kind of just go into the background of, when did you first see signs of autism within your son?
Well, with Jayden, for me, it seemed like I seen the signs of autism very early on in his life. He didn't have the typical reactions that most children do at a particular age, as far as being affectionate towards parents, as far as the way that he reacted towards certain social cues. I had 3 children before him that were considered to be, normal. So I was familiar with these kind of social cues that he wasn't obtaining.
Yeah.
So probably around the age of 2, when he wasn't speaking, he wasn't walking, he wasn't reacting to certain cues, like I was saying. We did take him in to get evaluated.
Wow.
He was under the age of 2 at the time, and that's where the process first started.
Yeah.
So he wasn't initially diagnosed prior to being 2, but that's when they first started monitoring the situation. And then after he turned 2,
Right.
they were able to make an official diagnosis.
Yeah. And that's so early too to notice these symptoms and to diagnose. But I heard early diagnosing is pretty helpful to the development of your child too as well.
Well, it's extremely helpful to find this stuff out early, because what you tend to go through, what I've learned just with my own son and working with other people that have children with special needs, is you feel lost. You feel like, what do I do now? Especially for me, I had 3 typical children, so to speak. So I knew how to raise children, but when it comes to a special needs child, it was, what do I do now?
Right.
So when you do find out that, or they do get diagnosed, one of the first things that they do is start to give you resources. It's a lot of resources. You don't always know exactly where to go, but at least you have something to help you with the question of, what do I do now? So there's another piece of it too. Obviously when you come to having children, there's 2 parents.
Yeah.
It's critical to have buy-in with both parents. And one of the things that I've seen, and that kind of happened to me, was that both parents didn't buy into the diagnosis in the beginning, so they weren't both on the same team as far as what should be done moving next. So that was a little bit of an experience that I had at the beginning, but that kind of evened itself out, which was a good thing.
Okay.
And it definitely helped with the raising of our children once we separated, and my
Okay.
son was still with me.
Right. Are you your son's main caregiver?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And so when you say buy-in, is that kind of like believing the diagnosis?
Well, I guess you could say it's like believing in the diagnosis. I know as a parent, usually you don't want to think that there's going to be something wrong with your child. We always pray for the best. And I've come to experience that there tends to be denial sometimes in a small percentage of cases. And sometimes that denial lingers, and then sometimes it changes into acceptance as well. And then everybody's able to move in accordance.
Right. How are you able to you said you have other children as well. How are you able to incorporate raising an autistic child within his siblings and just the family, even your wife, just how were you able to navigate that in the beginning?
Well, navigate basically having a special needs child and incorporate that into the family was extremely easy.
Good.
The family is very loving. His siblings all love him to death.
That's good.
And they were always able to step up and assist me, especially when I was single, when I needed that assistance.
Right.
One of my daughters took it upon herself to start learning sign language so that she could teach him to help him better communicate, because he's nonverbal. Another daughter of mine, her name is Essence. Another daughter of mine named Jasmine, she was just very compassionate, affectionate, and loving towards him. And then he also has another older sister. And it's a unique experience because she had her own struggles when she was born. She wasn't diagnosed with autism, but she's recently been diagnosed.
Wow.
But there's been things, obviously, that we've been dealing with her. But she also embraced him into the family, so she's made it easy. And right now, If I need somebody to lean on, and it's not me or my wife, it's going to be the youngest daughter.
Yeah.
And her and him have a special bond because he spent a large portion of his early years sleeping in the same bed with her, sharing a room. So they do have a unique bond.
Right.
And from what I can see, between the two of them, they seem to have some kind of unique understanding as well. So it's just a beautiful thing to see and to nurture those relationships, and for me to be blessed for him to have siblings that understand family and community. They've been a tremendous source of help.
Right.
So,
That's amazing because it's not that way for everybody.
No.
And in terms of community, you've spoken a lot about UDW as well. Could you tell me a little bit how they've helped you out?
Yeah, absolutely. So UDW, for those that don't know, is short for United Domestic Workers. What they are is a union for IHSS providers. IHSS providers are people who take care of their clients in home due to mental or physical disabilities. It can be a family member. It doesn't have to be. In most cases, it is a family member. One of the issues that I was running into with Jayden was trying to become a part of the IHSS program so that it could help with the income situation, taking care of Jayden. There will be too many times where I would have a job, but Jayden's school would call me and I would have to leave my job to go pick him up because he might be having a bad day and they can't take care of him. And there was only so many times that they were going to let me leave that job before they just told me, we can't have you come back anymore.
Right.
So I needed the IHSS program to help me sustain my life and, pay for bills, rent, and things like that. But when I applied, I thought it would be easy because of his diagnosis, but I was denied.
Wow.
And then I couldn't apply for another year or so, and then I got denied again. And then I had to see a judge and got denied again. And throughout that process, it made me feel like I was a bad parent. Even though I had 3 other kids, they were doing great in school. But they were like basically saying that it's behavior issues, that he's not being raised right. That's how it felt.
Wow.
I explained this issue to UDW, and what they did was send me through a course that taught me how to go through the assessment properly. I found out the mistakes that I was making, which is usually typical mistakes that a lot of people make when they're going through this process. And I went from being denied, to having enough hours to sustain myself and my family, so that I didn't have to worry about getting a job and getting called off from work, trying to find care for my child, who would need a protective supervision 24 hours. So thanks to them, they helped me get through that process, and then they brought me on board as well. So I ended up doing volunteer work for them. I became a salaried employee as well. I ended up leaving, but I'm still tied to the union. I still do work with them. I'm on their bargaining team. I'm bargaining and negotiating for the contract. The reason that I do that is because that union helped me so much as a provider. Working with them, I got to work with other people in my same situation, whether they had a child with special needs or they were taking care of a parent. A lot of times they run into issues dealing with the system, and I felt it my duty to reach back and help because this union helped me, and I was in their shoes, not knowing what to do, ready to throw my hands in the air when I was being denied, and they came through and helped me, and I just wanted to help other people in that situation as well. So I thank them tremendously for the work that they did for me personally, but also for the work that they're doing throughout the state, and also some of the things that they've allowed me to do to reach back into the community for the special needs and their providers to put together events for them, like a special needs Christmas and Easter programs for the special needs community.
That's wonderful. And so in your experience, like experiencing that denial, do you think it has something to do with, also being like a Black father, having a Black son with these, like on the spectrum? Do you think it's like maybe a racial thing as well? Or is there an aspect to that? I mean, I haven't done the research on it, so I don't want to assume, but...
I don't believe there's racial undertones to the denial.
Okay.
There are, what I've come to learn, so when I was on one side of this being denied at first, I just thought it was extremely unfair. But as I learned that this is happening to a lot of other people, regardless of race and creed. But what I've learned is there's a lot of checks and balances put forth by the state that makes it harder for a lot of the social workers to give us the hours that we feel that we need, because they have to justify a lot of this stuff to the state. And sometimes, and this is speculation, they might not want to answer to that. And I know sometimes, based on my experience, there's been a lot of people in my position that were denied that just say, forget it. And now there's nothing coming out of the state budget and stuff like that. So, I mean, I don't think it's a racial thing. I think there's an issue with the system and the way people are able to access this benefit that's supposed to be out there and accessible to all of us.
Right.
There's too many hurdles in place. And for a lot of people that are in this situation, they have trouble navigating this. And again, I found out firsthand by working with the union. Sometimes they make simple mistakes and they won't get educated on those mistakes properly. So they're never able to get onto the program. And some of them, they don't know that they'll have somebody like a union or other resources out there to assist them.
Right.
And again, you get frustrated and beat up. And if you're taking care of a family member, you always have that lingering feeling of, this is my family member. I was supposed to do this anyway. And I understand that, but again, there's certain situations where this makes it impossible for you to work to take care of your family.
Right.
So the barrier to entry for some of these families needs to be lowered. That's what the biggest issue is. And again, the confusion with getting yourself into the system and the qualifications needed to be in there. So that's the biggest hurdle. I don't think it's really a racial thing. It's more of a systematic thing.
Yeah, and systematically, I mean, just kind of under the Trump administration as well, with all these threats to healthcare coming about, is there fears from you or other parents that you know?
There are extreme fears in regards to some of the legislation that's being put about. So, for instance, there's certain things out there that would make it so that people wouldn't qualify for Medicare. They qualify at 65 now, but they want to raise that age to 67, which would take off a lot of people. They're putting in work requirements so that you qualify for these benefits. Those have been taken away, but they're talking about putting those back in. For those of you in the older generation that have dealt with that, you know how hard that can be. They're talking about vouchers for medical services. You pay for your medical services, we'll give you a voucher. A lot of times those vouchers don't cover the cost of that service.
Right.
Providers aren't making that much money. So when they have to provide their own services like that, it's just unfair to them. So there's a lot of legislation that's been set up that's going to hurt people that are the special needs community that have access to these benefits. And again, being part of the bargaining and negotiating team, being part of the union, this is something that we are actively fighting against to make sure that this legislation doesn't happen.
Right.
We're trying our hardest right now to get a new contract in place before anything comes down that's official that will really affect our providers and members and our special needs community adversely. So for there to be constant attacks by this legislation on the people that have very, very little, and the people that have a lot are the ones that are benefiting off of this, is an extremely unfair. And it's something that's deep in my heart that I want to fight against. And I know there's a lot of people out there that want to fight against this oppression. And again, with the union, we have been getting people together to rally and fight back against these attacks against our program.
Yeah. That's great. That's really good, because you have to speak up or else nothing is going to get done.
Or else you're going to get ran over.
Yeah.
You know, and we're a large people. We're a large voice. One thing that I've learned having a special needs child, there is probably not a more vicious, more passionate fighter than the mother of a special needs child or a child that's taking care of their parent that raised them.
Yeah.
When you do wrong by them, they're ready to fight, and they're ready to fight fiercely. That's the kind of energy that fuels me when I have to speak with a legislator or a senator about what we're doing. I feel like I have the support of 50,000 people, and I'm their voice.
That's amazing.
So even though I don't have a political background or anything like that, when I talk to these people in politics, I'm not scared because I have that strength behind me.
Exactly.
So.
That's really good. And you spoke about, too, even just like with your son's diagnosis, it's made you more of a selfless person. Can you kind of dive into that as well?
You have to be selfless in that situation to be a provider. You can take the label of son off of it because obviously if it's your family member, you're going to take care of them.
Right.
But I mean, just you pour so much of yourself into them to try to make the world a normal place. You have to be selfless. You have to sacrifice certain things. But it also gives you a certain drive to be better, to create a situation, that an environment for your family and them that's just conducive to them having a normal life, as normal as possible. So most of the things that you do, the way that you move, you're always thinking about, how is this going to affect my son?
Right.
You know, there's that is there regardless if you're raising a family. but it intensifies in that situation because they have a harder time adjusting to circumstances.
Yeah.
So you want to make their circumstances conducive to them. So it does motivate you and drive you to work hard and be selfless in a lot of different areas, which, I didn't know I was selfish in some areas until Jayden came into my life.
Yeah. You can really learn from that too.
Absolutely.
So I'm trying to think. He's 9, so he's in the age of socialization and things like that. So when he started going to school, when did you speak to the teachers or pull them to the side or kind of let them know the situation, or how did that?
Well, that was a natural occurrence because he got diagnosed so young.
Yeah, that is true.
Once he got into the school system, he was already identified as being on the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
So he went into the special needs program immediately.
Okay.
I was scared to death. I did not know how that was going to work. I did not know what that looked like. But thankfully, my experience with his school district has been absolutely wonderful.
Wow.
He took the bus to school, which, again, it scared me. I didn't want to put my son on the bus. And I did not know how he would act in that environment, brand new on the bus.
Right.
But he loved it.
Oh.
He absolutely loves the bus ride. He loves school. The teachers give you the opportunity. You meet them on back to school night, which is like the first week or two of school. And there's open communication with them. And they're very communicative. You have different meetings about your child and their progress, what their goals are. And my experience with them has been nothing short of phenomenal. With the way that they treat my son, the way they educate and nurture him. He wakes up in the morning and he's excited to go to school.
Wow.
So I know that they're doing a good job. And the biggest indicator of that to me was during COVID. He was already used to going to school. I think he might have been in the first or second grade. And he liked taking the bus to school. Once that stopped and he was doing homeschool, he missed school. He was able to kind of do homeschool, but the thing that hit me the most was we went to a local convenience store and they had a bunch of race cars, big trucks. He likes toy cars. They had a big model stand of toy cars. And he walked up to that stand and the first thing he picked out was a school bus. That let me know he missed riding that bus and going to school and seeing his friends. So he has an amazing experience at school. The curriculum that they developed for him and the other children has been outstanding. And like I said, the communication and the hand-in-hand communication with setting goals and trying to achieve those has been phenomenal. And it's been a lot better experience than I ever could have wished for. And they did a wonderful job of alleviating my fears right away. And it's just been a good experience the whole way through. He's in fourth grade now.
Wow.
And it's been a good experience.
That's such a blessing because, again, that's not always common.
It's
so
not.
That's really awesome. You can send your kid off somewhere where you feel like they're going to be safe and taken care of.
Right.
As far as sports, so he's into sports and football. So I heard he got on the football team, or is that? Can you clarify the story for me, please?
he is into sports.
Yeah.
So obviously, a little background. I coach football at high school locally here at John W. North, and coaching football. When I had my son, he's my first son. My first thought, of course, is, I'm gonna have a little athlete. I'm gonna be able to coach him. It's going to be great. But it was very apparent to me early on that might not be the case. Okay, so. He's growing up. I let him, have his own little interests, but he started to take a liking to sports and just throwing the ball. He took a liking to football, and he used to walk around all the time. That was one of his first words was football. And every time I used to ask him something, he used to respond, football? Jayden, are you ready to eat football? Jayden, do you want to go to school? Football?
Yeah.
Okay. But so he can throw and catch a football. He loves basketball. But again, this brought me to my question of, he likes sports. What do I do now?
Right.
So I started looking around and I found a few sporting programs for special needs children, and I got him involved. So he's been able to participate in baseball. He's been able to participate in jiu-jitsu.
Wow.
He's been able to participate in basketball, which has become his new favorite sport. And one of the things that I was able to do, identifying these programs, I found out there's a lot of different programs out there throughout the county that help special needs people. So when I was working for the union, UDW, I was able to put together a packet that listed all the special needs programs in each city, and we would give these to members that were interested in identifying sports programs for either youth or social programs for adults with special needs. Because again, this was a situation where it was like, what do I do now? I have this child that's interested in sports.
Right.
So again, I did get him involved in sports, organized sports, and he loved it. And the camaraderie that you build, the ability to meet other families in your position, and that's been another big key for me is meeting other families in my position. Because now when I'm talking to somebody and I say, hey, I have a 9-year-old son on the autism spectrum, and if they say, oh yeah, I have a son on the spectrum too, it's like we've had a conversation of 1,000 words without saying anything else, because that's an issue that you run into time and time again, where people don't understand and they treat your child unfairly. And even family members, you run into that with family members, which tends to hurt the most, but you get used to it, unfortunately. But yes, he is into sports. He's very social with the sports. The community, the parents, the kids, it's a great community. They do other things outside of just playing the event. They have social things that they do after the event's over, after the sports season is over. And then as you transition to other sports, like from baseball to soccer, you'll come across these same exact people.
Wow.
And you'll continue these friendships and relationships, and you'll build them, and they'll grow, and your child will be out there having the time of their life and getting to, be normal and play with other kids.
Right. Have you noticed a difference in Jayden since joining these programs?
Yes and no. When I first noticed it, it was funny because he was so shy. But then to see him open up and get into it and notice that difference, and then notice how he approaches the sports now when it's his first day on a new sport, is with more anticipation and eagerness to find out what's going on, to see if it's a good fit for him.
Yeah.
And if it's not a good fit for him, he'll let me know in his own way that, hey, I'm not feeling this.
Right. And you guys kind of have this language that you speak, right? You can understand each other. And how do you, I guess just as a parent, it might come more naturally, but how did you have to develop that and kind of learn?
So it goes back to that thing that you were talking about, selflessness. Not getting frustrated with the fact that he can't talk like you're used to talking, like me and you are talking now. But he has his way to communicate. So you have to be selfless, and you have to be patient, and you have to be kind, considerate, and just understanding, and you have to want to understand, because they want to communicate. And they are communicating.
Right.
You just have to take the time to learn. And it's not easy, and it takes a while, and some of it does come naturally, and a lot of it comes from being around them every day and picking up on certain cues, and it's not just everything that they're giving to you. They will learn if you teach them how to communicate in certain ways with you.
Right.
So it's always a learning process, but you learn how to do it.
Yeah, because you care.
Because you care.
And even, like you said, your daughter learning sign language and kind of teaching him that, and just stuff like that is really important, because I'm sure they obviously want to be heard too and understood.
Yes, absolutely.
So you kind of talked about family maybe not understanding, and that could be hurtful. I know you talked about, with his mother, but is there any other instance that you feel like there was a disconnect, or maybe someone didn't understand how to?
It's hard to pinpoint one situation, because like I said, you kind of get used to it.
Okay.
There was a situation recently, I guess, where a couple of months ago, I had took him to the hospital because he wasn't feeling well, and he was coughing, and he had to put his mask on, and he went to the back to get his vitals taken, and he was just coughing a lot, and he wasn't understanding, how people perceive that. Most of us try to suppress the cough. He didn't. He had to let it go.
Yeah. And
one of the nurses over there was just like, can anybody get that kid to stop coughing? And my first reaction was, well, he has autism. He can't help it. What's your excuse for being so rude? And it's just stuff like that. But you have to kind of tread carefully, because you don't always want to just respond like that. But there are certain times where you just want to put people in check just a little bit. And sometimes you'll let people know, hey, you know what, he's verbal and non-autistic. Or, they take exception to that, and they'll treat them accordingly. But there's other times where it's just, you kind of met with rudeness right away, and there's times you don't have patience for that. So like I said, when you attack a special needs child, usually that fierceness, it comes.
That's so true, because not everybody knows, but at the same time, there's a certain way that you should carry yourself anyways, and you can't just say slick stuff like that, regardless of the situation.
And if you look at him, he looks perfectly normal. You wouldn't tell until you really start to engage with him. So I'm assuming that's why she made that comment. But that's the most recent type of thing
That's kind of
that
like,
happens on it happens all the time.
yeah. In regards to juggling work and family and just other life duties, how are you able to do that with Jayden as well?
At one point, it was kind of hard, but you get so used to doing it, you don't realize how hard it is. But the thing that actually helps me juggle all of this is my wife. We got married last June 1st last year,
Oh, congratulations.
but we've been together for about 4 or 5 years. But she's the one that is allows me to be able to go out and work and coach and do other things outside of the house, because she's the stabilizing force. She's there, she's cooking, she takes care of him. She's the one that actually got him potty trained.
Wow.
So he loves her to death.
Yeah.
So those kind of relationships are extremely important. So she takes him to his appointments, to her appointments with him. So she's really taking on that responsibility without being asked. And kind of that goes back to, it takes a certain kind of person, especially if you're not taking care of your own child, to step up and be that kind of person. So without her, I absolutely would not be able to go out and function the way that I'm able to now, because there was a point where she wasn't there. And like I said, it was a lot more difficult as far as getting everything done, and you got 3 other kids, and you're a single dad, and you're trying to get all this figured out. But once she came into my life, and it was a true partnership, and she took on that role willingly and lovingly, I didn't know how much that was going to free me up to take off and do what I needed to do to take care of the family. But it did. And thankfully, things have been, very fortunate. We've been very blessed as a family, and it's a team effort. It's absolutely a team effort.
That's beautiful. That's really awesome. And so even with people who don't have a support, even how you said before her, you didn't really have that support. Were you ever able to like take a breath? Like, did you?
No.
Yeah.
No, and again, that's one of the things that you kind of just get used to. And again, it's, if you're dealing with your child, it's almost like you don't think about that. You don't think about, hey, I just need a break. But again, me and his mother were separated. So there would be times, she would take him on the weekends. So you do have a break then, but at the same time, you're so invested in taking care of your child. It's almost like, what do I do with this free time? I'm ready for him to come back so I can get back with our normal routine, because his routine becomes your routine. So when he's gone, it's like, what do I do now? So you do get those small breaks, but it's almost like it becomes so normalized being with them every day. It's just, you don't even really think about it too much as far as, I just need a break. And again, that's speaking from my own perspective, because I've definitely come across people that do. And again, there's situations and programs out there, if you become part of that IHSS program like we're talking about, where you can hire a respite care provider. Another benefit for people that are dealing with and taking care of people with special needs. Some of these people need that respite. They need that break. So that's why it's important, again, to keep that program in place, because my situation isn't everybody's.
And so for like having a child that's neurodivergent, what is something that maybe other children don't experience, but that you kind of, I want to say, like, enjoy about, like, there's something different that you're like, this is special about my son?
Man, it's really hard to kind of break that down into either one or two things, because it's my son is special, but it's almost just like it's an energy that he gives off. And I've spoken with this about to other people that are around him all the time. Unprompted, it's just this infectious, joyous, embracing and just loving the fact that he's alive. And that keeps me grounded, and happy to be alive. So it's just the thing that stands out about him to me the most is just his spirit and the way that it can kind of just jump out into the atmosphere. And I don't know if that's exactly what you were looking for. No, that's beautiful. That's the thing that kind of, that's what I think of when I'm thinking of that question.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so as he's aging and getting older, I know you shared in the article too that you are afraid of like what happens to him when you pass away. Have you taken any steps towards like thinking about what's next for him, even like after schooling and down the road?
Well, there are programs in place that help you with after school. He's about 10 years away from that, so we would definitely cross that bridge when we get there. Nice. But I know that's there, so I'll pretty much know where to go look. And again, The school district has been wonderful with me in that aspect. There's also services that are going to be afforded to him through the regional center as he becomes an adult that'll keep him active and have activities for him to do throughout the day. In regards to a bigger plan, this kind of goes back to me talking with my wife and making sure that financially we have things in place so that if anything were to happen to me, that wouldn't be a struggle that they would have to worry about. My kids are all aware, you know, that hey, if something happens to dad, this is a community effort. And I try to, I guess, raise my kids with that always in the back of my head that hey, you know, if dad is gone, Jayden needs to be taken care of. I'm gonna do whatever I can while I'm here to make sure that that's easy for you guys to do should something happen to me one way or the other. And I'm gonna make it easy for my wife as I possibly can. I'm gonna make it easy for my kids, again, financially, but also by having them continuously engage and hold these kind of bonds and relationships with Jayden so that he's always continuously got that trust there, even if I'm not around.
Yeah, that's great. And how is Jayden doing now with school and everything?
Jayden loves school still. He looks forward to it. He enjoys his little break. He goes into his little routine when he's on break, but when school's back in session, he's ready to go. He's doing great in school. I talked to his teacher the other day. They love having him. And again, school is a place that he likes to be.
That's
so
really good.
he's doing really well there.
Yeah, I'm sure that's like just a relief too.
Yes, it is, definitely, because it was a big concern for me is even getting to school, riding on the bus, how's he going to behave when he's there? And when there are issues, the school does reach out to me. I've had to go to school one day to observe his behavior. But again, that comes down to communication. And they're trying everything before they bring me into the picture. And then they're allowing me, they're sharing with me, hey, this is what's been going on. This is what we've been doing. And how can you help? And how can you help us help him? So again, it comes down to having a good community around your child.
That's really good. So as we wrap this up, I just want to know, do you have any tips of advice or anything that you'd like to say to other parents or caregivers that are, you know, maybe dealing with a child on the spectrum or something similar?
The best advice I can give you, and you're probably already doing this if you are taking care of a child, is do not give up. Keep fighting. Always look for all your resources. If you get lost in the process, reach out to your local union. A lot of times they have answers. There's people there just like me that care about the special needs community, and they want to give you all the resources that they can possibly give you, and they want to help you. So that's what I would advise people to do, is just don't give up. Don't feel defeated. You are your child's voice. You are their advocate. So you can't give up. And again, you're not alone. Reach out for all of your resources, please.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Jermaine. This has been so great speaking with you. Thanks for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Alyssa Hall, and I'm with Dr. David Young, pediatric neurologist at Loma Linda University Health. Hi, David. How are you today?
Good. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for being here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here.
So, Dr. Young, how long have you been at Loma Linda?
I've been here for a year so far. It's been a really great time. I've been working with the Inland Empire Autism Assessment Center. I'm also in my own clinic, too, with the neurodevelopmental disorders focus. It's been a really great time, both on the inpatient side and then seeing a lot of these kids, many of whom have autism or other neurodevelopmental conditions, just progressing through the years.
Wow, that's amazing. And what inspired you to get into this field of work?
Yeah, you know, it's been quite a journey. It started all the way back in college, and so I was just working, needed to volunteer as a way to get into med school, and I happened to land upon this one clinic that was a part of the audiology department, and it turned out it had a big focus on autism. And so for the first time, I was really working with kids there, seeing just all sorts of behaviors that I was just completely unaware of, and it really intrigued me, and I could see that there was a huge need. And so that kind of launched me on a path. I actually ended up doing a lot of research in autism during med school, and from there I really wanted to go into the field of pediatric neurology. And so a lot of opportunities kind of came along the way, and one of the things I was excited about at Loma Linda University Health is that it's associated with the Autism Assessment Center too, and that was a chance for me to be involved in an integrated clinic. So I'm really glad to be here.
That's amazing. And then can you break down to our audience what autism is?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think autism, there's a lot of perceptions about it that can be quite confusing, and it can present itself in so many different ways. And I think that's part of what makes it such an opaque condition.
Right.
It's really kind of has the name now of autism spectrum disorders, and so there is quite a wide range. But within that, there's a few core areas. And so I like to think of it as having really two main features that we can see in our kids. And one is within the realm of sociability. And generally, it's really having some impairments in how we socialize. And so you and I were talking to each other, and we're just having a conversation.
Right.
But for kids who have autism, that can be really difficult. And it can be something that they don't even necessarily have an awareness of. It can impact their relationships and ability to make friendships. And so that's one key area. And it's really the core symptom is that sociability. But the other part, and one that maybe we oftentimes focus on, is the areas of repetitive types of behaviors. And so this tends to be doing the same things, having certain rituals, needing to fix schedules, or always lining up cars the same way, maybe moving in certain ways, and also kind of having some sensory challenges. So you or I, we hear noises, we see lights, we filter all those out, but kids with autism can be very sensitive to that, and so this can be something that will really disrupt them and set off a tantrum. Or on the flip side, they can actually be very hyposensitive. So no matter what kind of sensory things are coming in, they may just not be aware of that, and it's hard to get their attention. So these things together tend to impair how they can interact with society, how they can interact with families, how they can be with their own siblings, and it can be challenging for them. And so that's usually how we see it present, and those are the core symptoms that we're looking for in our evaluations.
Yeah, and then specifically in children, because it seems like a lot of people kind of get diagnosed later in life.
Yeah.
Why is it important to maybe diagnose early, or what does it look like in children?
Yeah, really great question. And you're absolutely right that especially since autism has become, there's more awareness around it, a lot of people haven't had that opportunity to be diagnosed at such an early stage. But I'm very thankful that with increased awareness, with both families and also providers just really looking for the signs of this, we've been able to get kids into clinic and to evaluate them at that early stage. And the reason it's so important, I like to think of our minds as being something that is actually can be shaped a lot. And over time, the ability to shape our mind starts to decrease. And so as we get older, there's the old saying, and you can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? Not completely true. I like to think that even at our age, we can still learn a lot of things.
Yeah.
But certainly kids, when they're young, and especially as they're younger, really at those early stages, those are the times when their minds are just so plastic, we say, and moldable, malleable. And so although autism can look like a condition that is sort of a forever and it's really just fixed, it's actually not so fixed. You can oftentimes provide changes early on that can really set them off on a trajectory that's far different if we didn't have those interventions.
Right.
And so getting that diagnosis early is really important. Then you can start those interventions and then really hone them to find the way that your child is responding best so that you can make a difference really for the long term.
That's really amazing. And for caregivers like Jermaine, what could they do to better support their children with autism?
Yeah, his story was, I think, a really touching one to me. It looked, just from hearing his background and just going through that process of getting a diagnosis, I think it can certainly be very overwhelming. And I could sense that from his story, that he's looking really for community and having a huge challenge in that in the beginning. And so something I like to say is that a lot of times the first step forward can actually be to take a step back. And that's because, in that moment, you're getting this diagnosis, you're feeling overwhelmed and really just this flood of emotions. And it can be just so hard to breathe in that time. And so sometimes just taking a step back and saying, okay, this is something new. This is something that I am unfamiliar with. but I'm not alone in this. There are many people, there are many resources, there are many ways that I can engage with others. I think can really hopefully take that edge and the load off of just that sense of being overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And so I think one thing I really liked about his story is that, in the beginning, he turned to who I think all of us would turn to if we can, it's our families.
Right.
And I think he had a lot of hope and expectation. I think there's a line there about how this is sort of a forever condition, and then I would turn to my, forever partner in this and be able to find a solution together.
Yeah.
And many people can find that solution, and that can be very beautiful. But I think in his case, he did, reflect also a story that we hear, which is that sometimes we expect the people we want to lean on the most can turn out to be something where maybe we are misaligned. Maybe we do have different viewpoints and different perspectives. And sometimes then there can be a lot of disappointment and a lot of hurt in that time. And although that was really difficult, something that really stood out to me was he didn't stop there.
Right.
He reached out and he found other communities. And I believe he found one of the caregiver unions that was able to provide just a sense of camaraderie,
Right.
A sense of community, of people just being there, of advocacy for autism and different needs. And he kind of showed us that there are communities that are out there. I think, many people are not even familiar probably of many of these communities that exist. And, maybe he didn't even know about that either. But he was someone who, in that process, whether he reached out or someone reached out to him, just by connecting with people and just rubbing shoulders, it sounds like at some point got connected and then found people to go alongside him in that path.
Yeah.
And so I like to think that if other people are finding themselves in that situation, that's a really huge opportunity. Take a step back and look for those community of people around you. And that could be as easy as your family right there, someone who's just available, and that would be a real blessing
Right.
if you can. But if not, there's many other communities potentially out there. It could be your church or your religious organization. It could be meetup groups, other hobbies that you have, friends.
Right.
But just all of those ways to be able to reach out and find other people who can come alongside you in that journey.
That's amazing. And I believe that Jermaine, he had gotten Jayden into sports, like football. So can you tell me the benefits of putting, children with autism in activities or sports or things like that? What can that kind of help them with?
Yeah, as a sort of a football fan myself, I could really ally with him in that, finding something that you yourself are interested in is a great way, I think, to connect with your kids too.
Yeah.
And so I think that, engaging with your kids, finding different ways, whether it's sports, whether it's ballet, whether it's other activities that they like and you like, I think can just make that such an enriching experience. I think a lot of people think, okay, my child has a condition, and so therefore I'm kind of stuck doing whatever they want to do.
Right.
And to a large extent, it is oftentimes following their cues and just responding to how they are. But there's other ways too. I think those kids also respond to our own interests.
Yeah.
And his just genuine enthusiasm about football,
Right.
I can only imagine that's somewhat contagious too. And they had a picture of him, just even throwing a football with his son, and I think that makes it a lot more livable. He enjoys football, and clearly his son, it seems like he's enjoying football as
Right.
well. And what better way to engage with him in that, and just allow him to find those different activities that really interest him.
Yeah, that's really special. And then even with the parents that you might come across in your field, what is their biggest concern for their children?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges are the disruptive behaviors that a lot of the kids will have. We think about it, oftentimes with autism as being sort of the impairments and the inability to engage, and that's hard enough by itself. But what can be really challenging too is when it's sort of the disruption that's not only passively sitting behind, but sort of actively causing challenges. So sleep can be one really big issue where they just can't fall asleep, and so they become upset and can throw tantrums. It could be the inability to go out. So I remember talking with a family recently who they said they've not been out to eat for years.
Wow.
And it's just because they brought their child into a public setting. That kid just doesn't behave in a way that they felt others would be able to accept. And then sometimes it's just throwing tantrums even at home. And so this could be banging their heads against walls. It could be causing injury to caregivers. So a lot of times the disruptive behaviors can be just a real challenge and a burden for them on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
Yeah.
And I assume requires a lot of patience and understanding from their parents, and even I guess going to school. Like, would you suggest parents kind of inform their teachers, or how could they go about that as well?
Yeah. So I think a lot of the ways to address the behaviors, first is setting the expectation that it is challenging. And I think that's a big part where communities can come in, especially people who have similar conditions, autism societies, for example, where other parents have dealt with this and can provide more insight about the strategies that they found for this. But alongside that is, part of the communities that they are connected with would be school. And I certainly advocate really engaging and being upfront with teachers, with everyone really in school about the underlying conditions, just so that everyone at least has that awareness. And the nice thing about school, school, certainly there's challenges, there's funding shortages, different perspectives, different ways that people approach it. But it does have sort of at least a structure that, at least in theory, should provide a lot of additional supports for kids with autism, other types of special needs. And so part of this is something called an individualized education plan, where the school district can provide an evaluation process that looks at a lot of these different behaviors. Also provides different psychoeducational testing. And so these can identify sort of what are potentially different cognitive impairments, different areas that can disrupt the child's ability to learn. And alongside that, they should also provide then additional services. So that can be speech therapy, sometimes occupational therapy. These can really supplement therapies that they otherwise might not be able to get so easily at home. And other types of behavioral therapies too. And that especially comes in with sort of more disruptive challenges, is having ways and techniques that can help to redirect some of those behaviors. So school, I think, can be a huge resource, and being clear with them, with everyone on board, to really engage and provide that on a continual basis for the child.
That's amazing.
I could share a little more too about the disruptive behaviors.
Yes, please.
And approaches to that. So one of the mainstays of treatments for autism really is focusing on a lot of the different therapies. And that includes physical therapy, occupational, speech therapy, areas that we may be more familiar with, whether or not your child has autism or other conditions. But one that's maybe a little more unique to autism are the types of behavioral therapies available. And so I mentioned a little bit about school, how they can have different behavioral therapies. And one of the mainstays that we have that can oftentimes be sort of in a clinic-based setting too is ABA therapy. And so this is a applied behavioral analysis that really focuses on developing the skills and behaviors that ultimately are sort of what we might call the desired ones, and typically end up being less disruptive types of behaviors. And it's an approach that has been sort of pretty well validated. There's a lot of evidence that this does work. It's relatively accessible. It doesn't require a high level of cognitive understanding, and it focuses a lot on providing rewards for the correct behaviors. And so because of that approach that many kids can engage with, a lot of times it does have the effect of being able to calm down and teach these children about behaviors that are not so ultimately disruptive for everyday life. But that's probably the best known types of therapies. But I think another type of therapy that we found to be really effective is something called dyadic therapy. I think this one doesn't get as much attention, but this focuses a lot on dyadic, meaning sort of two players. And this is about how the families and the child interact with each other. And so a lot of the other therapies can focus on the child, him or herself, and making sure that they kind of do the right thing. But a lot of the conflict can come from families trying to work with their own child. And that can be so difficult to find what works, what techniques, how do I do this?
Yeah.
And so dyadic therapies can come and provide families, parents with those techniques, with the observation, and how do I respond in these situations? What do I do that can be more effective and less inflating or inciting?
Right.
And a specific form of that is called parent-caregiver parent-child interaction therapy. And this is a form that really has been also validated in autism, is showing parents how they can directly interact with their child in a way that a lot of times can reduce that tension.
Right. Yeah. And so kind of thinking of parents aging with their children who have autism and them being worried, who's going to take care of their child or who's going to maybe help them out, depending on where they are on the spectrum, right? When, say, the parent passes. What steps could a parent take to ensure that their child will be okay or looked after if they're no longer able to provide for them?
Yeah. Looking to the future, I think, is a very complex time, and certainly the parents have probably experienced, that they are oftentimes can be a full-time support for them.
Right.
And just the thought, I think, of that vacuum can be really diminishing. And certainly I would like to, step back even in that circumstance and just to reflect that, a parent who's thinking ahead in the future, I think that in and of itself is a really huge first step.
Right.
Because it can just be, I think most people were focused on putting out fires, just day to day. I just want to get through the day. But to think ahead for the future, I think is already, a huge first step for them. And I think part of the first step, along with kind of taking the steps to establish their future, is starting those conversations early. You talked about school as a way of being open with them. Right. Hey, my child has autism. How can we together help them? Right. And I think similarly, within one's own individual communities, being open with family about this, starting those conversations early. I'm not going to be here forever. I'm not asking you to take over the care of my child, but, I just want to, talk with you about what does this look like? I know you have your important life with many different responsibilities, but I do have this child with the needs, and, can we talk about this? And I think planting those seeds early can be helpful because they're probably not an overnight conversation. Right. It's certainly easier done rather than in the moment when something emergent might happen. Right. Along with that, there can be other steps that can really help. There's certainly a very practical planning, finances, legal. What do I do? How do I establish that this child will continue to get that support? Right. So oftentimes when we have children who are aging into becoming adults, we might initiate what is called a conservatorship process. And so as they're getting toward 18, we start a process that allows them to essentially continue to be cared for by their parents. And that will put together a legal framework so that you can continue to do all the things that you need to do, the things that you've been good at in caring for your child, but continue to be legally protected and have that authority when your child may be in the hospital as an adult. Yeah. And then also, looking even further is setting up a will, setting up a clear succession plan and how things are going to transfer. And then there's even special needs trusts too that can be established. And these can all be overwhelming. I mean, I myself thinking about these things, it's hard enough to think, what am I going to do? And so with the challenges of a child, sometimes multiple kids with different conditions, it can be difficult. But there are autism societies. Autism Society, I believe a chapter in the Inland Empire. There's Autism Speaks, other different groups. The domestic workers union that we've talked about, that could perhaps provide a lot of additional guidance expertise, pointing people to some of the professional advisors that can help you with that whole process.
Yeah. And then for the family members and friends who do want to support and help out, how can they do that without overstepping any boundaries?
Yeah. For the families themselves or the parents themselves, I think it can be so difficult, figuring that out. And, if we flip the page to the families, oftentimes I think they can be even more confused about how do I help. Many of them come in and they can just tell that their family member or their friend is going through a hard time. But, as we talked about, autism itself is difficult to understand. Many people have not experienced that. And I could just, certainly as a friend to others and a family member to others, that can be a really hard time to wrap our heads around how to help. I think what makes it even more challenging is that, many of us may have experienced where you've tried to help someone there and sometimes got a response that maybe wasn't what you expected.
Right.
Maybe it was a cold shoulder, maybe someone, you try to help and it got worse. The kid is throwing a tantrum, you try to provide some discipline and then just exploded in your face.
Right.
And so these kind of experiences can, I think, cause family members to want to kind of take a step back and really kind of disengage from this. But, I really, am encouraged by the heart of those who do persist. And I would encourage people to, to not be afraid to re-engage. I think that many times the parents who are going through this, when they are overwhelmed, may not always respond sort of in their proudest way.
Right.
And I think a lot of times when we're approaching this, I like to say that coming at it with both an honesty and a curiosity can really pay dividends.
Right.
And so with the honesty part, I think it's perfectly fine to just be okay and be open that, you don't know. I don't know what is going on and I don't know how to help, but I would love to be here.
Right.
And I think that can really open up the door sometimes for the parents to then share about their condition. And there can be so much insight that's shed there.
Yeah.
And so this is an opportunity sometimes to just providing, just being there, just lending an ear. I think that can be therapeutic in and of itself.
Right.
And saying, I don't know how to help. I have no expertise in this area, but I'm here and I'm curious enough to listen to what you're going through, and please just share as much as you want.
Yeah.
I think another area too is that people oftentimes want to help and they don't know how, and I think very similarly, just really asking how I can help rather than necessarily telling you I'm going to do it this way, I'm going to do that. And I think that just puts the ball in the court of the parents, because maybe they're not in a place where they need help. Maybe they need a specific way to help. Kids with autism have sometimes very, as I mentioned, inflexible ways of doing things, inflexible schedules. And the parent may know that I got to do it a certain way, or it tends to throw things off. And so just asking about that can sometimes open those avenues and provide that open door to provide the help when the parent finds that to be the most helpful.
Right. And then when raising a neurodivergent child, how do you go about kind of, I don't want to say like a normal childhood, but how do you assist them and not really living with like too many restrictions, right? Like you don't want them to feel different or othered, even though they do have this neurodivergence. How can you, as a parent, make them feel comfortable and, appreciated, right?
Yeah. I like how you mentioned about the neurodivergence and how really within this there's a huge spectrum. And a lot of times in autism, we talk about treatments and some people might even talk about cures, but really at the end of the day, there can be a lot of traits within individuals with autism that can be really valuable as well.
Yeah.
And so I think celebrating those traits can be a huge part of really allowing them to be who they are, allowing them to express that neurodivergence, and to not, it's not that everything needs to be changed. It's not the fact that they don't socialize the same way we all socialize, so therefore they must go that way.
Right.
And instead engaging with them and finding the ways that that they enjoy, that allows them to be productive in their own way.
Right.
So I think identifying some of those areas can be really helpful. And then, we talked a little bit about the disruptive side. I think those are the parts where a little more, generally people will want to find some changes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably because not only can it be hard for the parents and for the people around them, ultimately it can be hard for the individual themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And they can feel very dysregulated. They can feel very upset. They can be really angry. And so I think those are important areas to address, even though we don't necessarily want to mold people in a certain fashion.
Yeah.
This is allowing them to be who the best that they could be,
Mm-hmm.
to be someone who is not locked up in tantrums or other types of overwhelming behaviors.
Right.
So I think engaging with them on all those levels, and then, ultimately, as much as possible, allowing them to be the kid who they want to be.
Mm.
So I think going back to football,
Yeah.
just engaging with them in different sports, finding their interests at school and encouraging in them.
Right.
And not necessarily finding one's whole identity around it. We're all a mixture of so many different identities, and seeing that as a way that they too have so many unique traits that they can bring to the table.
Right. And then even for our audience, how can we go about our days and maybe better identify if somebody is on the spectrum, or just kind of make sure that we are, what's the word? Just more understanding.
Yeah. I think, I find myself sometimes, I could just be on the bus
Mm-hmm.
or walking around and see someone who is somewhat more disruptive too. And,
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes my emotions flare up. And I think that while I can understand
Yeah.
myself, that's something where I've realized that I too, need to have a greater understanding,
Mm-hmm.
a greater awareness of the people around me.
Right.
And so, certainly just on an everyday level and interacting with people is that recognition that there are a lot of people who have been struggling with this probably for a long time. A lot of
Right.
families who have been going through that. And then I think in that sort of extending extra grace, extra
Mm-hmm.
latitude for them, and just recognizing, that they've been going through this. Something that helps me to remember is, I may have challenges in that moment with them, but these are usually families who have been dealing this for years, if not decades. And so just really, in some ways, celebrating that, and just knowing that they have really accomplished so much just to be able to bring them, to that point.
Right.
And then I think also, in other cases when we have friends and you're seeing a child and that child just looks a little different,
Mm-hmm.
And you're wondering about maybe he or she has autism. As we talked about, early diagnosis can be really helpful.
Right.
But there can also be a lot of sensitivity around this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think something I found is that when people bring up these topics with their friends and family, they can be very well intentioned about that,
Yeah.
but it's not always taken in the right way.
Right.
No one wants to hear that their perfect child
Mm-hmm.
has maybe a very different condition.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there is a sense of responsibility in a way to be able to provide that. And I think ultimately is really an expression of love and of care
Mm-hmm.
to be able to do so. But really recognizing if it's not heard, then it's really not going to be helpful.
Yeah.
So finding ways to gently inquire about these things, just asking, I've noticed he does this. I noticed she does that. Tell me more about this. Is this something that happens a lot?
Yeah.
And I think that those will open the doors so that the parent can talk more about that. And hopefully if there is a concern, just begin to plant that seed that will allow them to get the evaluations that they need.
Right. And then for parents and caregivers, how can they maybe take some time for themselves in between?
Yeah. I think also the story of Jermaine and Jayden, just hearing about how it changes their life so much. I think this really reflects so much of what so many other parents feel. It can become one's identity. It can feel like this is it. Now I am married to a condition,
right.
and I need to take care of this, and that's all of life. But I think the mental health is so important, not only for the child, but also for the caregiver.
Yeah.
And something we like to say too is that if we're not taking care of ourselves as parents, as caregivers, we're not going to be able to take care of our kids either. And you can easily be overwhelmed with that. And so the practicality of that is challenging.
Right.
They oftentimes need to be there 24/7. But that's why, as much as possible, just engaging with other communities, finding other supports, finding ways to trade off can provide such a huge difference.
Right.
And so I think taking time for oneself, hopefully can provide that energy so that, you'll be there for each moment.
Right.
And then we were talking a little bit about the, planning for the future and the transitions, and it was making me reflect on how each of those milestones is really a huge achievement. And so say you have a child who's become 18 and, you had expectations. You hope your child would go to college, would become the next, great software engineer, great golf player, or whatever you may have. And maybe your dreams have really shifted and you're applying for a conservatorship instead. And I think that can be really deflating, but I think on the flip side, I think it's really still a huge milestone. I mean, you think about, as a parent, that you've been there taking care of your child for 18 years. You brought him that far.
Right.
And I think really finding ways to celebrate those moments, to know that you've done that.
Yeah.
And I think you can be really proud of yourself, and your community can be proud of themselves, for having come alongside you. And so finding each of those moments, that could be a bigger one, maybe all the small ones. Just going to the next level in school, going to the next level in one's social skills group. Those can all be things that I think can be times to celebrate and times to take a load off of that burden of the everyday life that one goes through.
Even when it comes to being on the spectrum and getting older and maybe wanting to pursue higher education, what would that look like? Do you know?
Yeah, so there is a huge spectrum, and we do see kids, from everything where they are flying through college and doing really well, but maybe just having some social challenges, to kids who, operated at a much lower grade level. And so really identifying early on is as much as possible sort of what their cognitive abilities can help guide them in terms of understanding sort of where they might be going in terms of their academic achievements. And so part of that is going through some of the psychoeducational testing as well. There are sort of what we call the autistic savants, and some kids with autism can have extreme, intellectual superpowers, and those are things that they can really leverage and learn. But even there, knowing that some of the challenges can be how they're going to engage with other people, with their peers. You or I know that we're engaged in work, so much of it is social, right? We've got to be able to interact.
Right.
And that's a big part of how we're able to function in society, get jobs, keep our jobs, and all that. And so working with children earlier, they may have all the skills, the academic skills, but just also recognizing that there's so many social skills that are important too. That doesn't mean they're going to be, the same way that all of us are, but just finding the social skills groups, finding the peers. There's even Big Brother groups that can provide mentorship for younger kids. Those can all be ways to help to build those social skills so that they know how to function better in those environments. And then on the flip side, just recognizing that you also have many kids who do have intellectual disabilities. So a misnomer is to think that all kids with autism have intellectual disabilities. Certainly there are the savants like I mentioned, but also to recognize that there is definitely a higher rate of intellectual disability that goes alongside autism too.
Right.
And so that may be the expectation for a lot of kids, and so it may not necessarily be college as we see it, but there are a lot of other opportunities too. And so looking for environments that might be more focused on specific skills that they can engage in. And so not necessarily that they have all of the degrees that we're used to, but just finding something that they can do, that they can do well, and that they can enjoy day to day. So I think that can be a big part of it.
Right. And then in terms of maybe even diagnosing your child or getting the support or like therapies that you've talked about, not everybody can afford that. Do you know any examples of support or organizations that do that?
Yeah, so autism evaluations have traditionally been really challenging to get, and they come in all sorts of forms and ways. And so autism diagnostics can be as simple as going to your pediatrician, 30-minute encounter, and they say, your child has autism. And the other extreme is you can have a multi-day, multidisciplinary evaluation with psychologists, neurologists, occupational therapists, speech pathologists, many, many eyes looking on them. And as you can imagine, those would be really expensive, to get those therapies. But thankfully, there have been a lot of changes, and I think along with the awareness of autism, there has been a lot more support in providing these diagnostics. And so, I do work also with the Inland Empire Autism Assessment Center, and through engagement with the insurances, they've provided a lot of families really kind of at cost to have these evaluations. And so I would take advantage of that. I think if you have a clear-cut case, the 30-minute evaluation may be sufficient, but a lot of times, especially with subtler cases, it can be really important to have the integrated evaluation.
Right.
And so along with that too, I think another sort of revolutionary part of autism diagnosis is genetic testing. And so we found actually that there's a lot of new tests that have been really at cost they've been provided oftentimes by the insurance companies or covered by the insurance companies. And that's because they can really shorten that diagnostic odyssey, as we say, to find perhaps a specific gene that is underlying someone's condition.
Wow.
And this could be really important for our prognosis, so to really know what to expect for your child. It may not be just run-of-the-mill autism, but it may be a specific condition. And then also, I think a big part is communities. So I had a chance to go to an SCN2A families conference, and this is a specific genetic condition that's associated with autism and epilepsy. And here we have all these families coming from around the nation. Even I met someone from Dubai, internationally, gathering together to talk not only about autism, not only about epilepsy, but in this specific context of this particular condition. And it was just such rich experiences, tips, advice that they could share, and both celebrating victories. There was even a period of obituaries for children who had passed away, but being able to mourn together and find healing together.
Right, and so find that community.
Exactly, yeah.
And so as we wrap this up, I would just like to ask you, what's like your last tip of advice for, parents going through this with their children at this time?
Yeah, I think really taking a step back and realizing that they're not alone, and recognizing that community doesn't necessarily land in your lap, that a lot of times it does take seeking out that community. That could be, you're not part of a church, join a church. You're not part of a society, join a society. And also not to be discouraged. The first time that you meet different people, you may get some response that you don't appreciate. It doesn't seem helpful. That's fine. Move on to the next one. There are a lot of people who are experiencing this, and many new avenues of discovery that are constantly emerging. And so keep hope in that whole process.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Young. This has been so great speaking to you about this, and I've learned so much more about autism and the spectrum, and thank you. I appreciate your knowledge.
It's my pleasure. Glad to be here.
Yes, nice meeting you.
Likewise.